Alright, so by popular request, here it is, the Emotiva Basics A300 stereo amplifier. This is something that many of you have been asking me to review for years now, and I totally understand why. For a lot of enthusiasts, the A300 has served as an important stepping stone for their hi-fi journey. And that's because for $399, what you get is something that's well made, something that's relatively affordable, and something that promises to offer performance that's way beyond what you can get from your typical AV or stereo receiver, which is where most of us begin our journey. So what I'm going to do in this video is first we're going to take a look at what you get with the A300, then I'm going to comment on performance, and then I'm going to comment on whether or not I feel like the A300 is still competitive in today's market, because this amplifier has been in production for nearly 5 years. So first, let's start off by commenting on the amplifier's build quality. I think for $399, this amp has a very solid feel to it. It weighs around 26 pounds, and it's pretty much a full-sized amp. It's around 17 inches in depth. In fact, if you're curious about specifications, just click on the description box down below, and I have a link that'll send you to the product page so you can get all that good information. But focusing back on the amplifier, the construction, like I said, is very well done. The front plate here is going to be brushed aluminum. The pillars on the side are going to be made of the same material. We have the white text silk screened onto the front plate, and the rest of the chassis is going to be made of a thin steel material. Now, when an amplifier is plugged in but not powered on, the light here, this is going to be our power button. You're going to get a orange halo, which actually looks kind of cool. But when you turn the amplifier on, you're going to get that familiar blue color, and we're going to have two LEDs in the center here. This is going to be our left and right channel indicators, and that's about it. This is a very straightforward product, so now let's take a look at the back. Okay, so as you can tell, the back of the amplifier is just as minimalist as the front. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to features, going from left to right. On the left, you're going to have a switch for the LEDs. So remember those two LEDs on the front panel. If you don't want them staring back at your face when you're playing music, you just go back here and hit the off switch. But if you like the aesthetic, then you just leave it on. Beneath that, we are going to have 12-volt triggers. So if you have a preamplifier that'll allow that, all you have to do is connect this to the preamplifier. So when you turn it on, this amplifier will automatically turn on and off with your preamp. Just one less thing you have to do. Again, kind of cool. We're going to have our analog inputs, our speaker terminals, we're going to have an IEC inlet for the power cord, and we're going to have our on and off switch here in the back. And that's it, guys. So now let's take a look on the inside. Okay, so here's the inside of the A300. And I gotta say, I'm really impressed with the build quality, and I really like the clean layout of this amplifier. To the left, we are going to have a huge toroidal transformer, and to the right of that, we are going to have 40,000 microfarads of filter capacitance, which for this kind of money is pretty unusual, in a good way. We're going to have our transistors against a heatsink in a push-pull configuration, and overall, what you're getting with this Class AB amplifier is something that's rated at outputting 150 watts into 8 ohms, and that's a 20-to-20 measurement with very low distortion. However, when you look at the output rating into 4 ohms, that's where things get a little bit funky, because they rate it as being 300 watts per channel, but that's at 1 kilohertz and with 1% distortion level. So I have a funny feeling that its clean output into 4 ohms is quite a bit lower, but you know what? That's really not that important, just because this amplifier is nonetheless very powerful. You guys will also notice a couple fans, and those are for thermal regulation. Now, this is one thing that I need to mention. When I asked Emotiva if there have been any updates to the amplifier since it entered production nearly 5 years ago, they said yes. As of late 2019, they swapped out the fans for something that's quieter. So apparently, these fans only kick on when the heat sink reaches around 156 degrees Fahrenheit, and the speed is now variable, meaning that they're not going to come on full blast. That's just going to vary depending on what kind of regulation is needed. And on top of that, the fans themselves are supposed to be quieter, so if you're pushing this amplifier, the fans should draw less attention to themselves. Anyways, that's going to be the inside of the A300, so now let's talk about how it actually sounds. Okay, so the build quality is pretty good, but now it's time to talk about how the A300 actually performs. Now, before I begin, I need to make this clear, guys. There's not going to be a whole lot to say in this section, just because we're talking about a basic stereo amplifier, and its only job is to amplify the signal. That's it. Now, sure, there's different ideologies on what makes for a good amp or a bad amp, with many people believing that it should amplify the signal with no coloration whatsoever, and that's all well and good, but that's a different discussion for a different day. Let's just talk about what you can expect out of the A300. So first, let me start off with those of you who may not be dyed-in-the-wool audiophiles. I'm just going to use very simple language here because odds are you won't be able to understand my descriptors later on in the video. So, if you are considering this as your first real quality amplifier, I think you're making a very good choice. Not only does it feel very solid and satisfying, but the sound is going to be exactly what you're looking for, because when most people step into something like this, they want to feel like they're experiencing their loudspeakers for the first time. Like there's this clarity and power, effortless detail, and just a huge jump in sound quality over what you would get from your typical AV or stereo receiver. And that's exactly what this amplifier delivers. And plus, its sound is a little bit more detail oriented, which is exactly what a lot of people are wanting when they step into something like this. So ultimately, I think it's a good choice. And now to those of you who are a little bit more seasoned and you can understand audiophile vernacular, this is what you can expect from the A300. So ideally an amplifier should be neutral, right? And by and large, I think the A300 is impressively neutral for the money, but still, it's gonna have a certain sound to it, and what you're gonna experience is something that's more on the forward side of neutral, right? It's gonna be all about clarity. It's gonna have a slightly pronounced top end. I do feel like the upper mid-range in particular is just a little bit thin sounding. The rest of the presentation is pretty balanced. It's very powerful. It's very clean. And that's the kind of sound that you're going to get. If you're hoping, to get an amplifier that has that warm sounding mid-range or that rolled off top end or something that's ultra polite, you're not really going to get that out of this amplifier. But to be clear, it's not a bright sounding amplifier. The treble response, for example, isn't so tilted up that it's going to make your speakers sound like they're horns or like your soft domes have suddenly turned into metal dome tweeters. It's not bright in any way. It's just a little bit more accentuated. The mid-range is going to be very clean. You're going to get this nice open sound full of detail, but it's not going to have that body and warmth of maybe some other amplifiers in this general price point. And the bass is going to be really good. The bass is going to be nice and strong and clear. I think for a Class AB amplifier at this price point, it's very good, and it can even take control of some woofers that definitely benefit from a good damping factor. I think the damping factor is like 500 or so into 4 ohm loads at least, which is good enough to control thicker drivers from the likes of, say, Bacard Audio speakers or Polk Audio, especially their LSI series, stuff like that. But yeah, guys, it's not really a whole lot to say. Dynamic output out of this amplifier is going to be very good, especially when you consider the cache. The noise floor is going to be impressively good for a Class AB amplifier at this price. No, certain Class D amplifiers for a little bit more money are even going to have a quieter noise floor, but it's going to be good. I don't think too many people are going to complain about that. I noticed that there was no mechanical noise coming from the transformer or any kind of buzzes or anything like that, which is always a nice thing from an affordable amplifier. So overall, I mean, it just is what it is. It takes the signal, it amplifies it, and in this case, it does it with an emphasis on power and clarity. It's a little bit more forward, just a little bit more of a lively sounding amplifier, and if that's what you want, this is definitely something worth looking into. So now it's time to talk about equipment matching and the gear that I feel pairs up best to the A300. Okay, so the good news is that when it comes to equipment matching, the A300 is very easy to accommodate. So first, let's talk about preamplifiers. One of the most obvious matches is going to be Emotiva's own preamplifier, the PT100, which was designed to pair up well to the rest of the Basics line. But let's just say that you want something that has a little bit more of a warmer presentation. You like what I had to say about the amplifier's power and its detail and its generally open presentation, but you'd like just a little bit more warmth. Well, if that's you, the good news is you do have a few options. Number one, you can pair this up to a really good tube preamplifier. That makes for a great match, but unfortunately, I can't think of anything under $1,000 that I can recommend to you all, but what I can recommend are a couple loopholes. The second being the shit low-key EQ, so you could technically EQ that sound in if that's what you're looking for. And then if you have a little bit more money, there's going to be the iFi Audio iTube 2. So this is going to be a tube buffer slash preamplifier, which is supposed to inject that tube sound into your system. And it actually has a real tube inside the circuit, and you can even adjust the different types of presentations that you want from the tube buffer. And if you only have one source that you have to connect via analog input, then you can use that as your tube preamplifier as well. So a pretty cool device, definitely something worth checking out. So now it's time to talk about speaker matching. So to those of you who are new to this, don't worry too much about synergy. Just buy the amplifier, listen to it on your system, enjoy, and through time you're going to figure out what it is that you're really looking for. But don't invest too much energy worrying about this. Now, to those of you who are more seasoned audiophiles, I would say that this amplifier pairs up best to speakers that are either neutral and or a little bit on the warm side of neutral. Definitely something that's not forward or thin sounding. Good examples of a solid match would be speakers like Bacard Audio. Dynaudio's Evoke series is pretty good. Polk Audio's LSI series, even Magnapan, as long as you're in a, say, a modest sized room, because those speakers really like a lot of power. And even though this is a powerful amplifier, obviously it's not going to take them to like ridiculously loud volumes, but tonally speaking, that's also a good match. Anyways, guys, that's going to be my take on equipment matching. So now it's time to go over some of the caveats before we wrap this whole thing up. So when you look at the A300's price and what you get for the money, there's really not a whole lot to complain about. Now sure, as with every hi-fi component, it's not going to be to everybody's taste. Some people aren't going to like the look, some people aren't going to like the sound, but outside of that, the only legitimate complaint that I have has to do with its mechanical noise floor. Now note, I'm not talking about its electrical noise floor. Examples being hiss coming from your speakers or transformer hum or buzzing. It doesn't have any of that. Instead, I'm talking about its fans. So not long after I installed this amplifier into my secondary system, I heard those fans just buzzing along, and I'm talking about at like 70 to 73 dB listening volumes. For those of you who don't know, I don't listen at very loud volumes. In fact, that's where I become useless as a reviewer. I can't tell you how a product performs at really high volumes just because I never really go there. Now, I do admit that in my main system, it seemed very quiet in every sense, but still, it's an experience that I had that's worth relaying to you guys. And it seems like something that some people run into and others don't. So it's just something for you to be aware of. Anyways, outside of that, it's a very solid amplifier, and that leads me to my final thoughts. Okay, so to wrap this up, outside of the fan noise that you may or may not encounter, I understand why so many people really like the A300, because for the money, it seems like you're getting a very good value. There's good build quality to the unit, and then there's going to be the performance, that open, powerful, dynamic, detail-oriented presentation. This is something that most people want when they're spending this kind of money, especially if this is their first amplifier. And let me tell you, when I was getting into the gig, there weren't many options at this price point. You could buy, like, say, a used Carver amplifier or maybe an entry-level Rotel, but those amplifiers didn't sound nearly as good as what you get today from something like the Emotiva A300. Now, earlier in the review, I posed a question. How do I feel it stacks up to other amplifiers at this price point, especially since so much has changed since it was first released? Well, I'm going to answer that at least partially at the very, very end of this review with a comparison to the IOTA VX amplifier. So stick around if you're interested in that. Otherwise, guys, that's going to be my take on the Emotiva. It's a very good amplifier for what it is. It has a distinct presentation. Not everybody's going to love it. For example, I'm a spoiled audiophile. I probably wouldn't go with something like this if I were to buy something now, but that's because I'm used to a different type of a presentation. But outside of that, that shouldn't really influence you, because it's up to you to decide what you like and what you don't like. So having said that, guys, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace. Okay, so this is as close as I can get to an apples to apples comparison. What we're going to do is we're going to take two Class AB stereo amplifiers that retail for around the same price and compare them to one another. To our left, we have the IOTA VX PA3 stereo amp. This retails for $340 US, and it'll output 45 watts into 8 ohms. To the right, of course, we have our big Emotiva Basics A300. This amplifier retails for $399 and will output 150 watts into 8 ohms. And as you guys can tell, there's a huge physical difference between them, with the Emotiva being significantly more powerful. Now, before we begin, I need to make a few things very clear. Number one, I'm not going to compare the Emotiva to anything more expensive because, quite frankly, you pay more, you get more. That's usually just how things go. And then number two, when it comes to the preamp that I use for this comparison, I used this guy right here, the Dynafrips Hestia preamplifier. No, I didn't use the Iota VXS-A3 or any of my other preamps because I didn't want to give any product a distinct advantage. And I feel like this is the most logical choice to go with. So, the big question is, outside of the obvious differences in terms of size and power, how do they compare in terms of presentation? Well, let me say this. They are totally different. I would say the Emotiva between the two is going to be the much more powerful sounding amplifier. That's a given when you listen to it. It's more dynamic. It has a livelier presentation. The treble's going to be tilted up a little bit more. And overall, this is just going to be the amplifier that'll appeal to somebody who wants that big, powerful, open, and dynamic sound. If that's what you want, you're definitely going to prefer the Emotiva. And also, if you have difficult to drive speakers or you listen at louder volumes, again, the Emotiva is going to be the best of the group, or between the two. But the Iota VX has some advantages. I mean, first and foremost, it's completely passive. There's no fans, so you don't have to worry about any kind of noise. But then there's also going to be the presentation. Compared to the Emotiva, it's going to be the more balanced sounding amplifier. The mid-range, the treble, the bass, it's all going to sound very even-keeled. And then there's going to be the tone. It's going to be slightly warmer. The Emotiva has a little bit of thinness in the mid-range that you're just not going to get from the Iota VX. And plus the top end, even though it's not as lively, it's going to be a little bit smoother, and dare I even say just a little bit more natural sounding. Obviously, it's not going to be as powerful or as dynamic, and it's not even going to be as open sounding, so it's just a matter of choosing what it is that you like. So the big question is, okay, well, what kind of speakers will work best with these amplifiers? Overall, I would say that they're pretty easy to work with. What you need to really pay attention to is the kind of power requirements you need. So if you, again, have a big room or a difficult to drive speaker and you listen at loud volumes, the Emotiva is going to be the way to go. Otherwise, for a lot of individuals, believe it or not, 45 watts is going to be fine on most speakers and most listening spaces to volumes that aren't, say, reaching above 90 dB RMS. Anyways, I just say RMS. Anyways, you guys get what I'm laying down. That's going to be my take on how these two amplifiers compare to one another. Hopefully that's giving you just a little bit more perspective. As always, thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.